Hey everybody, I hope you're well. Feels like I've been away for a while, which I have. I am happy to be back in the district. It does sort of feel like I left and it was hot and summer, and I returned and it's September and cool and fall. I have been, I think I still, like a lot of parents, still and myself, feel like I operate on the school calendar. September feels like the beginning of a new year. And two of my kids, both my daughters were moving in September. The oldest of my oldest daughter, I spent last week moving out of her Arizona apartment and then driving cross country with her, which is always an experience. We never have quite the time to make it a relaxed road trip. It's it was a little speedy, and we had to limp with a declining battery and some alarms in our Holiday Inns in the middle of the night, but we had, spending that, as all of you know who are parents, spending car time with your kids, even when it's extended car time, is a really valuable way to spend time together. So we enjoyed that. Although I am now happy to be back home, where my other daughter is in the process of moving. So we had a lot of literal moving pieces in our family in the last few weeks. I did return in time to go to the Lime Rock Historic Festival last weekend, which was again a spectacular weekend, and saw a colleague whose husband is also a racer. And saw a lot of incredibly historic vehicles there, which was really fun. And then I went for a hike in Washington at Steep Rock, which has since closed because of a fire that is contained, but they've decided to close it for, I think, about a week, or as long as they need to make sure that it's safe for everybody. So that is another indication of fall, I guess. I wanted to talk about grand juries for a minute. Which is not strictly in my lane. It's not I don't work with grand juries, and my current job is your state representative. But I do know a fair amount about them, having been a federal prosecutor. And so a little context, because they've been in the news recently. One of the jobs of, when you're a new federal prosecutor, at least, one of your jobs is to impanel grand juries, which is not fun, because grand juries can sit for long periods of time, sometimes years. And so I know most people, when they get called in for jury duty, grimace a little bit about having to commit a few days or a week or so of your life to deciding a case. But a grand jury, it doesn't necessarily sit every day. It can sit several days a week or one day a week, but they're around for a long time. And so when you have to impanel them, basically that means we're asking them questions about whether they can do this, whether they're willing to do this, whether they have any structural or prejudicial reasons why they can't serve. And of course, a lot of people, when they hear they're being called for grand jury service, balk initially because it's a big commitment. But what happens then is that once a grand jury is impaneled, the jurors get really into it. They get very dug in on the facts, on the law, on their job. And in my experience, because every time you seek a felony indictment in a federal court, you have to proceed in front of a grand jury, which means you have to present your case to them. And it's a lower standard, which is to say it's a standard of probable cause as opposed to beyond a reasonable doubt for actual trial. So it's a lower bar, and it's just the prosecutor coming in and presenting witnesses. So it's one-sided, pretty straightforward, but grand jurors can ask questions. And they take their job seriously. And first of all, after having started with them being very resistant, they almost uniformly come out of it saying it was a really positive experience, because they learn a lot and they, play a really important role. But that, because it is a fairly low bar and it is one-sided, the rules of evidence are not as strict as they are in court. So I've never been indicted in a lot of cases. Never not had what's called a true bill returned, which basically means the grand jury votes to indict, and it's called no true bill when they decide not to indict. That's never happened to me, and in all my time in the office and all my time with colleagues of mine, I remember one case when a no true bill was returned, and it was one in which there were particular things about it, and it surprised. We all knew that a particular colleague had a problem with that case, and they cleaned it up, and I think took it elsewhere. But I mean, one time I've heard of it happening before in DC in the last week. It's happened 4 times. That is unheard of. It is not a sign of incompetence of the prosecutors. It's a sign of the office being not taking their job seriously, not doing it correctly, and not listening to the grand jury. If you think there's an issue with your grand jury and not believing the case, you ask them questions. Do they need any further information? Can you present another witness? I just wanted to emphasize how incredibly rare it is, because they bring these jurors, they sit for a long time, they bring their real world experience to this job, and they take it seriously. And these jurors in DC have brought their real world experience to the cases they've been asked to indict, and in a city where people who violently attacked police officers with flagpoles, canisters, fire extinguishers, barricades, and then were pardoned and released and possibly monetarily compensated. I guess they decided that throwing a sandwich and scratching somebody's knuckles weren't really federal crimes. So I find that sort of encouraging, that people are bringing their real world experience to that service, because I know grand jurors take their jobs seriously. Last few upcoming events. I know there's an event for Matt Riska, the outgoing first selectman in Norfolk, who has dealt with many challenges in his career as first selectman. So I'm looking forward to honoring him. And then next week I am going to a conference on technology and AI in another NCSL, which is the bipartisan organization for state legislators. Was invited to it because I did a little work on the issue last year and decided it was time, given the threats and maybe the opportunities to check it as appropriate. I'm going to go out and sink my teeth into that one for a few days. That's where I'll be for most of next week. But maybe I'll see you out there this weekend. Have a good one. Take care.